All right, everyone, buckle up, because we're diving headfirst into a potential trade war between the U.S. and Canada this time.
Oh, yeah, this is a big one.
It is, and you know how everyone always says, like, oh, trade wars hurt everyone and no one wins well?
Right.
We might be about to find that out in a very real way.
Yeah, especially since this involves the U.S. and Canada.
Exactly. Like,
Yeah.
These are two of the world's biggest economies, right?
Huge trading partners.
And they share a massive border and so much history.
Absolutely, so much at stake.
And just to give everyone a quick refresher on, what we're talking about here, tariffs are essentially like...
Taxes.
Yeah, taxes on imported goods.
Which makes things more expensive for the consumer, obviously.
Exactly. And so what we're looking at today is former President Trump. He's back in the news because he decided to slap these tariffs on Canadian goods.
A good?
Yeah, again, right? And Canada's not just taking a lying down.
Oh, no, they came back swinging?
They did. So we're going to try to unpack all of this using some really great reporting. We've got articles from the BBC, the CBC, Al Jazeera, and Reuters.
Great sources.
Yeah. So we're going to look at the economic side of things, of course, but also the political maneuvering, because there's a lot of that going on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely.
So to kick things off, maybe you can give us a little bit of a timeline here. Like, this isn't the first time Trump has gone after Canadian aluminum and steel, right?
Not even close. This is actually, the latest chapter in this whole saga that goes back to Trump's first term.
Right. So just remind everyone what happened back then.
So yeah, back in 2018, Trump imposed tariffs on steel and aluminum imports from a bunch of countries, actually Canada, Mexico, the EU.
Citing national security concerns, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that was the justification. He said all this imported metal, it was threatening the U.S. industry, which he claimed was vital to national security.
And of course, Canada and others, they weren't too happy about this.
To say the least, they called the tariffs unjustified protectionist, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. And they retaliated with their own tariffs.
Right? Of course, hitting American products like bourbon and motorcycles and orange juice.
Classic trade war tactics.
It is what it is.
So then what happened? I mean, these tariffs didn't last forever, did they?
No. Eventually, after a lot of back and forth and negotiations, the U.S. and Canada reached a trade deal.
In 2020, right?
Yeah. And as part of that deal, the tariffs were lifted.
So everyone breathed a sigh of relief, sort of back to normal, at least for a little while.
Right.
But then here we are in 2025, and bam, the tariffs are back.
Yeah, it's deja vu all over again.
So what's the justification this time around? Like, why is Trump bringing these back now?
Well, officially, he's saying it's the same old song and dance about protecting American jobs and industries.
Right.
His Canadian aluminum and steel are being unfairly dumped into the U.S. market, which is undercutting American producers.
So he's basically saying that Canada's playing dirty and taking advantage of the U.S.
That's the gist of it, yeah.
But he's also hinted at something else, hasn't he? Something about foreign policy goals?
Yeah, he's mentioned wanting to pressure Canada to align more closely with certain U.S. foreign policy goals, but he's been very vague on the specifics.
So it's kind of hard to know what to make of that, right?
Yeah, it's all very murky right now.
But we do have some pretty strong reactions from Canada, right? Like, they're not just accepting this quietly.
No, not at all. The Canadian government has come out very forcefully against these tariffs.
And what are they saying?
Well, they're basically saying that Trump's justification is completely bogus.
Oh, okay.
They're adamant that their industries are operating fairly and that the tariffs are not about protecting American jobs, but about protectionism pure and simple.
And they've pointed to some economic studies, haven't they, that contradict Trump's claims?
Yeah, they're citing studies that show these tariffs are actually going to hurt American consumers more than anyone else because they'll drive up prices for American businesses that rely on Canadian aluminum and steel, things like cars, appliances, construction materials.
So basically, everything gets more expensive for everyone in the U.S.
That's the argument, yeah.
And Canada has also brought up this idea of long-standing supply chains that have benefited both countries.
Exactly. For decades, these two economies have been really integrated, especially in the manufacturing sector.
Right.
And Canada's arguing that these tariffs are going to disrupt those supply chains, hurt businesses on both sides of the border.
So it sounds like there's this big disagreement about the economic impact of these tariffs.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Trump says it's going to help American workers.
Right.
Canada says it's going to hurt American consumers and businesses.
And potentially hurt Canadian businesses, too.
Exactly. So, who's right?
You.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see how this all plays out.
Yeah, time will tell.
But what we do know is that Canada isn't just standing there and taking it. They've hit back with their own tariffs.
Right. And their response has been very strategic, very deliberate.
What do you mean by that?
Well, the goods that they've chosen to target with their retaliatory tariffs, it's not random.
Okay.
They've specifically gone after products that are produced in states that are really important in U.S. presidential elections.
Oh, wow. So they're hitting Trump where it hurts.
In a way, yeah, it's a way for them to exert political pressure, try to influence voters in key areas that could swing the next election.
So it's not just about economics anymore, is it? It's become this political chess match.
Exactly. And Prime Minister Trudeau has made it very clear that he sees this as a political fight.
Yeah.
His public statements have been pretty fiery. He's accused Trump of being reckless protectionist. He's even said that these tariffs are an attack on the Canadian economy.
So much for that special relationship between the U.S. and Canada.
Yeah, it's safe to say that things are pretty strained right now.
And you know what's really interesting is that this isn't just a bilateral issue anymore either, right? Like other countries are starting to get involved, or at least they're starting to express concern.
That's right. The Al Jazeera article we have, it highlights how both China and Mexico have reacted to this trade war.
Yeah, and what's their take?
Well, they're both worried about the potential for this to escalate into something much bigger.
Right.
A wider trade war that could drag in multiple countries and really destabilize the global economy.
Because, everything is so interconnected these days, right?
Exactly. One trade war could easily trigger another.
And that would be bad news for everyone.
Yeah, global trade would suffer, investment would dry up, prices would go up.
So, it's like this ripple effect.
Exactly.
So, in the big picture then, if this keeps escalating, if these trade wars keep going, is there really a winner? I mean, who actually benefits from all of this?
That's the million-dollar coin, isn't it? And honestly, I'm not sure anyone really wins in a trade war.
Right.
Sure, there might be some short-term gains. Maybe a particular industry in one country gets a temporary boost.
Right.
But in the long run, everyone involved usually ends up facing some degree of economic and political fallout.
And, we haven't even talked about the damage to international relations.
Right. These kinds of disputes, they can really poison relationships between countries, create mistrust, resentment.
So even if there is some kind of economic winner,
Hmm.
you have to wonder if it's worth the cost.
Exactly.
So what can our listeners do? I mean, how should they be thinking about this whole trade war situation?
Well, I think the most important thing is to understand that these issues are incredibly complex.
Right.
It's not just about economics, it's about domestic politics, international relations, and, even the personalities of the leaders involved.
Yeah, so we have to look at all sides of the story.
Exactly. What are the motivations of the different players? What are their goals? What are they willing to risk? And what are the potential consequences, both good and bad?
That's a lot to consider.
It is, but it's worth it. The more informed we are, the better equipped we'll be to make sense of this increasingly complicated world.
Absolutely. And, as we wrap up here, I think it's important to also think about, the big picture. Like, what does this whole trade war situation tell us about the future of globalization?
That's a really good question. Is this a sign of things to come? Are we going to see more and more countries turning inwards, embracing protectionism?
Or is this just an isolated event?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's definitely something worth thinking about.
Because the answers to those questions are going to have a huge impact on all of us.
Absolutely.
So thanks for breaking all of this down for us. It's been really insightful.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
And for everyone listening out there, stay tuned. We'll keep following this story and bring you any major updates as they happen.
Absolutely. Stay informed.
All right. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.